Welcome to another episode of the Rain Race podcast. And I gotta say, if you're in the United States and you're tuning into this podcast tonight, kudos to you. We're not gonna buck the trend here of it's not even a committed Tuesday night podcast. I mean, we were on a Thursday roll for a long time here, so I guess our allegiance to Tuesday night is not too strong. But alas, here we are anyways. Appreciate you tuning in, whether you're here live or whether you're here after our live episode on a podcasting platform or on YouTube. If you are here live and you have any questions you want us to discuss throughout this episode, just drop them in the chat box. We'll try to get to those at the end of the episode if we can. Of course, off to my right, and finally back in nice and smooth video feed. It's off in the Esses. How does it feel? It's like, you can just reach around the room and everything's nice and perfect.
It's buttery smooth now. I mean, we got on early tonight to troubleshoot these issues, and in classic tech fashion, we logged in and everything worked perfectly. So,
of course,
you love to see it. There was no troubleshooting required, and ready to talk some sports car racing.
Yeah, it's been 2 weeks since we've been on this podcast. In those 2 weeks, we've had a couple different sports car races happen. One of them being the 8 Hours of Bahrain, which we will discuss this episode. We also had that little thing at Martinsville with the MX-5 Cup cars. I know you got a chance to tune into that. Of course, I did as well. Quick thoughts on that, actually. I want to hear what you thought about the bumblebees around the quarter-mile oval. That's sort of an all-star race.
I'm outing myself. But I can't lie. I can't lie to you all. I haven't watched the race yet.
Ooh,
I didn't lie.
No, I said I lied.
Oh, okay.
I said you watched the race.
Oh, okay. No, I have not watched the race yet, but I didn't tell you that, to be fair. So I was actually at a wedding that evening, and despite my best efforts to get the stream pulled up on my phone, the service was not sufficient to be able to do that. And it's just been very, very busy since, and I have not sat down to watch the race. So I have that queued up. I have seen bits and pieces of it, though, and I know that it was a fun race from everything that I have heard and the little bits and pieces that I've seen. So everything that I've heard about it is, a success, which... It provided entertainment, right?
Of course.
That's what we need in the off-season.
What could you ask for? I'll tell you how that race went from my side. I actually missed the start of it, so I'll out myself there as well, just for some sympathy. But the second half of the race that I was able to catch was exactly what I expected. It was MX-5 levels of entertainment. I also actually sort of had a rough idea of what to expect going into the race, because for the past... Not yearly. There has been a couple of years where I've missed it, but starting in 2020, I believe, I did participate in the Moon Car 24 Hours of Martinsville, which I guess loosely inspired that. And so I knew there was going to be a bit of the bumping and running into the corners, and just overall being a pack race at Martinsville, despite the fact that it's a quarter-mile paperclip. It delivered exactly what I expected. And as an all-star race sort of showdown thing, something to get maybe people who wouldn't tune into the MX-5 Cup otherwise, although I can't imagine why, after some of the highlights that make their way to Twitter or YouTube, a nice opportunity to get your eyes on it.
Yeah, I do wonder if this ultimately could lead to the MX-5 Cup cars supporting NASCAR one weekend. They go to Martinsville a couple times. They go to another short oval in Bristol that's severely banked, a few times or a couple times as well. So I wonder if we could potentially see the MX-5 Cup support one of those weekends. I know there's a lot of sort of support series that NASCAR carries with it, with their top 3 series, and then they also have, a series like ARCA that can follow it around. But that would be pretty cool, I think, from the sports car racing side. Introduce some fans of oval racing and some NASCAR fans to the MX-5 Cup some more. I think that would be a pretty neat idea.
Agree 100% on that. Let's talk about something that was a bit longer, first of all, but also a bit more traditional, we'll say, which
A
was
little
the
more sports
8 hour.
car racing-y.
Yeah, a little more. Hey, sports cars are sports cars, but
That's true.
we had some additional classes in this race. The Babco 8 Hours of Bahrain, the 2024 World Endurance Championship season finale. And I will say right off the bat here, I saw a couple people discussing around the race, and I just want to bring this up quickly because I've sort of been opinionated about this for a little while, questioning whether or not Bahrain should be the season finale. One thing I will say off the bat is, because this race has been the finale for a long time at this point, it is a track that definitely holds its own when it comes to the on-track action. We're going to talk about that specifically in a couple of minutes here, but there's no shortage of that. You can watch the race highlights if you want to see some of it, although apparently the WEC highlights may miss some critical moments of the race. So
I'd say.
I'm hoping that they put everything that they should have put in there. But if you did get a chance to actually watch flag to flag, you would see that there were some great battles on track there, as it's always brought a lot of drama. The one thing I've always said about Bahrain being the season finale, and I'd actually say the same thing about Qatar being the season opener, is it just doesn't have the same energy as a race like Fuji or a race like Spa, or certainly a race like Le Mans, but I'm not advocating that we make Le Mans the season finale again like it was back in the 2018-2019 season. But as a finale race, the fan attendance is just a little bit poor. Let's just say it as it is. You're in a market where there is not as much interest in sports car racing, and I don't think that that's a daring thing to say.
No.
So we are going to be stuck with, I don't want to say stuck with Bahrain as a season finale because that really does paint it as a negative, but it will be the season finale on the schedule for many years to come at this point. But me personally, I've always been a little bit mixed on it. I think it delivers a great deal of track action, but at the same time, perhaps the fan interaction there as a championship race could be a little bit higher.
Yeah, I think yeah, I agree with pretty much everything that you're saying there. There are worse places where a season finale could take place. I mean, this year it was a pretty darn good race to wrap up. I mean, again, you mentioned the highlights. I haven't been able to watch the entire race, but from the bits and pieces that I've seen factored in with the additional highlights that that were posted on the WEC YouTube, it looked like the racing was good. It's just, as you said, the fan interaction that was lacking. And Graham Goodwin was talking about this on This Week in Sports Cars that he does with Marshall Pruitt or some other, I think there's some other DSC Daily Sports Car members that sometimes join him. But basically, he put it perfectly. It was something along the lines of, there's a trade-off. Do you want to have this in a place that has intense fan interaction? Well, you want to have the fans, but you also need to have the corporate partners that make a lot of this a reality. And the reality is of it right now that there are a lot of corporate partners that are coming from that area of the world, and sports car racing is not cheap, and there's a big part that's played by these corporate partners in the success that we're seeing right now. So it's a trade-off, sure, but I think at the end of the day, it is probably one that's for the better of the sport overall. And who knows? Maybe 5 years from now, we'll be talking about better crowds and more of a sports car racing environment in some of these places that the series are visiting.
Yeah. I mean, I've even noticed this in Formula One as well. It seems like Qatar and Bahrain and even Abu Dhabi, a lot of people travel to those races, whether it be from the UK or Europe especially is a huge market for traveling to those races because it's cheap. The grandstands for those races, I don't know about Abu Dhabi, but I know for a fact Qatar was great value for money last year. Bahrain, I believe, is like the second cheapest race on the F1 schedule behind maybe Hungary. We don't have a fan base in sports car racing right now, despite the fact that it is increasing year on year, to really replicate that same level of fans going to the races. At Qatar or Bahrain in the World Endurance Championship. I don't know. We're a little bit spoiled by IMSA, I'd say, where we're starting off the season with the 24 Hours of Daytona and then ending it up at the at Petit Le Mans, which also is just setting huge fan numbers at this point in time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult to compare the two because, like you said, with WEC, you're going to so many different areas of the world, some of which are more, the series is going there because of corporate partners, whereas IMSA doesn't really have that. There is a bit of it to a certain extent, but, well, actually, yeah, there is some of it. That's why I don't get GTPs at CTMP. But, it's still in the same general region, and it's relatively easy. Well, not necessarily easy, but it's easier for fans to be able to access, going from, New York to Wisconsin as opposed to, New York to Dubai or Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
Enough of that, though. I'll leave that as it is. Just food for thought that I had over the race weekend. But once we actually did get on track this weekend, started off the weekend looking like it was going to be a pretty competitive one. And after qualifying, it was a Toyota front row lockout, which I think came as a bit of a surprise to some people. But it was Sebastian Buemi and the number 8 Toyota putting that car on pole over the sister number 7. Ferrari also was pretty strong this weekend. They rounded out the top 3, but it was a 99 Proton competition Porsche who qualified in 4th with Julian Andlauer behind the wheel. Really good momentum for him as he moves on to being a Porsche Penske factory driver in 2025. Already gave kudos to him in the last episode where we were talking about that promotion that he got and the drive that he put down at Spa this year. It's crazy to think, I had to be reminded of this today, that he was in GTE AM just last year. And the rise that he's had over the years with Porsche, he was in GTE AM for quite a few years. I think it was 2018 he started there with Dempsey Proton Racing. Continued there for quite a long time, and he's finally getting that bump up to the factory prototype team that I think he very well deserves. And he's a young guy, too. I think we said he was 26 years old, so plenty of time on that guy's shoulders, and I think he's going to be one to look out for next year. Over in LMGT3, rather, another front row lockout. This time it was from the 2 McLarens, who I think put down probably the best pace performance we've seen from them this year. After earlier on in the season, they weren't 100% up to potential of some of the other manufacturers we had seen. Of course, there's a success ballast holding back the 2 Manthey Porsches at this point with how far ahead they were. But nonetheless, it was Josh Cagill in the number 95 McLaren over the number 59 McLaren of James Cottingham. Going into the race, I do want to discuss a couple of the highlights that really came out of it. It's a race that, as a championship race, and thank God, well, number one, thank God we're not a NASCAR podcast, because if we were a NASCAR podcast, I'd probably be talking for about 3.5 hours this episode. But thank God we do not have the NASCAR playoff system in the WEC, because if we did, going into the final race, it seemed like it was the one that none of the championship contenders had any interest in winning. And in that case, I don't really know. I guess they would have decided the championship on who finished the highest outside the top 10 at this point. The number 7 Toyota ended up retiring from the race. Nick DeVries had a fuel pump issue with that car, and sort of a rare retirement for that GR010 hybrid, which was in its 4th season now, 4th full season. They'll be going on year 5 with that car next year. Has had a couple of Evo upgrades done to it over the years, but that's sort of seen as the elder statesman in the class nowadays. And a little bit surprising to see that reliability issue striking them out. And it hasn't been the first time this year either that Toyota has been caught out with reliability issues.
Well, they're getting pressured a little bit more, so
Yeah,
you get pressured from closer competition. You got to push a little harder on everything, and yeah, that's where the faults can come out.
yep, absolutely. Sister number 8, Toyota, of course, they were able to capitalize on some better fortunes, but they didn't have a completely smooth sailing race. We're on the back foot for a majority of the opening half of the race, actually almost 3/4 of the race. They were on the back foot. Sebastian Buemi got spun by the 82 TF Sport Corvette, and just got stuck in hypercar traffic, working his way up through the field. The number 6 Porsche, the championship leader, they were also outside of the top 10 for a lot of the race. A couple pit road penalties later on in the race from Lawrence Vantor for overtaking off track and then also causing a collision with a 36 Alpine. They, going into this race, definitely had a comfortable lead in the championship going into this one, over the 50 Ferrari, and ultimately the 50 Ferrari did not have a great race either. So I'd say the 6 Porsche was very lucky for that, because I can't remember exactly where they finished. I'd have to look at the final race results, but they definitely ended up finishing in 10th place. So they would have gotten, is that 1 point at this race? I can't remember how many points it is at Bahrain, because it is increased for being an 8-hour race. We'll get into those points standings in a little bit here. Want to talk about the safety cars, the rather rare safety cars that we see. I was actually thinking earlier on in the race about how often we see safety cars or the lack of how often we see safety cars in traditional World Endurance Championship races that are not Le Mans. Think back to Spa this year. Of course, we had the main one there with the number 2 Cadillac crash, which was actually a red flag into a safety car. We had one very early on at Fuji, but I'm pretty sure it went clean after that. A lot of the time, the virtual safety car is just able to clean things up, and they're able to go through without interrupting the natural rhythm of how the race is unfolded until that point. But nonetheless, in this race, we had 2 late race safety cars that bunched up the field, and I think it was after the second one we had an epic battle in the LMGT3 class. Posted a clip on that on my Twitter account if you want to go see the numbers that we pulled in with that one. But just looking at the onboard of that clip, it's crazy how that little battle unfolded in that class, and all of the LMGT3 manufacturers were really in the hunt there. Later on in the race. The number 5 Porsche also was leading the race after that last safety car restart, although worth noting that Matt Campbell in that car was on much older tires than the chasing number 8 Toyota of Sebastian Buemi, who noted earlier they did not have the race go entirely their way for a lot of it, but staying on the lead lap and getting bunched up with the field, they definitely, I think, had the strongest race pace, especially at the end of this race where they were on fresher tires than the leader. And a lot of their competition by that point had really bowed themselves out. Sebastian Buemi, it wasn't easy for him. He got himself in a little bit of trouble passing Matt Campbell the first time, sort of pushing him off track and having to give the position back. But then proceeded to pass him like 2 corners after he gave the position back, and then drove away to about a 30-second lead by the end of the race. So a commanding race win from that number 8 Toyota, but one that was definitely, I think, well-deserved from that team after the misfortunes that they had earlier on in the race and the pace that they showed since then. Also worth noting, I'm still going on down the list. It was the first podium of the year, first official podium for Peugeot, which is a team that I think more than anybody else we've talked about struggling this year. Good job on picking them, by the way. That was brave.
It was.
They did get that podium. But a season that started out actually looking very promising for them at Qatar when they were on that old spec car. And we thought, oh, this is the old spec car. Then what are they going to be able to do when they roll out the Evo packages for that car? It's surely going to improve. And it's for the entirety of the season, really, up until Bahrain, it seemed to go the opposite direction. And they really didn't have incredible pace at Bahrain. They lit up the scoreboards in free practice earlier on in the weekend, leading free practice 1 and I believe free practice 3 as well. But in qualifying, didn't have phenomenal pace. They qualified outside the top 10, both cars. The 94 car had some misfortune later in the race themselves, but the 93 was able to pick up a podium after the number 51 Ferrari lost their podium for exceeding the maximum tire allocation that is allowed for hypercars over the race weekend. You're allowed 36 tires between qualifying and the race. They used 38. So there you go. Finally, after the disqualification at Qatar, after a season of misfortune, we finally got a podium result from Peugeot Total Energies with that car 93. I guess good mojo going into the off season, but clearly I'd say they still have a lot of work to do. And I don't really know, beyond perhaps trying to put additional upgrades on that car, I don't really know what they can do over the off season. It seems like they still have some issues figuring out that car on a track-to-track basis, but let's give them credit where it's due. This is a performance that I think they can smile about going into the off season.
Yeah, I think that our hopes were probably set too high for them at the beginning of this season after the way that they came out of the gates. That was a car that at that point they had at least a season and a half of running on, if I'm not mistaken. As a full season plus the season opener this year plus a few races tacked on at the end of 2022, I believe.
Yep.
So, they had a notebook built out for that car, and it was such a huge change for them, going from the wingless version to now this fully winged, kind of a different concept. I think our expectations were probably too high from the get-go. Bringing the car in mid-season, there's so many challenges that they are facing with this car, and I honestly think that this run at the end of the season should hopefully this puts some pep in their step going into the off season. It was a strong run for them, and I would expect that Peugeot to be better next year. That's kind of I would sure hope so. But I mean, you look at how they improved with the wingless 9X8 over the course of its short lifespan, ultimately culminating with that strong run at the beginning of this season. I think give it a little bit of time, and it's gonna do just fine. We have not seen one of the new hypercars or LMDHs come out and be strong in its first full season. I think that's probably reasonable to say. Some of them have had glimpses. Ferrari last year was good, but they weren't really.
They weren't a championship caliber team quite yet.
Exactly. I think give Peugeot another, next season. I think we should be seeing some big gains with them. And at that point, if at the end of next season, if we're talking about, this car is still struggling to find good results, then maybe that's time to press the panic button. But I think this is a great way for them to end their season, and come back strong next year. They're going to be bringing this car back to, they're going to have a notebook now heading into the tracks. I guess all the tracks except the season opener with this car. So, and even that at the season opener, they're going to have testing. So, I think that they'll be just fine.
Yeah. Actually, that question that sort of ties into what we're talking about here. Which hypercar outside of Toyota, Ferrari, and Porsche impressed you the most throughout the season? My pick's Alpine, explosion at Le Mans and all. Somebody responded saying Alpine and BMW are making good progress. I would agree with that 100%. I think if I had to pick one, probably BMW, although it is close between them and Alpine. For BMW, there hasn't really been a standout disaster result from them the same way you can say for Alpine, that I can think of at least. They just have been, they were a little bit on the back foot earlier on in the season. They, to my knowledge, didn't get a podium this year. I don't think. I guess I'd have to look at the full season results to confirm that. Alpine did
BMW?
BMW, right. I know Alpine got a podium at Fuji.
I don't think BMW did.
Okay. But their pace later on in the season was starting to look really promising. Still, yeah, it mimics a lot of what we saw with them in IMSA.
They did, sorry.
They did? Where did they get a podium?
If Alpine got one at Fuji, then BMW finished ahead of Alpine there.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. We're like two races back, and I can't even remember. He's looking it up. I think you're right, actually, though. I remember talking about this Vantor versus Vantor at Fuji. So, yeah, you're right. It was the 15 that finished second there. Where was I? Oh, yeah. I think it mimics a lot of what we saw with BMW and IMSA in their first season there, where they have a lot of pace. They had some races where they were stronger than others. Ultimately, they didn't get a win on track. Of course, they did get that technicality win for their first season in IMSA, but 2024 is where it started looking a little bit stronger from them overall and picking up that first on-track victory at Indianapolis. I'm sure I would be a little surprised if we make it another full season without talking about a win for BMW Team WRT for next year.
Yeah, I think Alpine and BMW are the two clear ones that stand out. But there wasn't really one that comes to mind as a sweeping, terrible, horrible disappointment. Lamborghini was always going to be, in a tough spot, coming in with, they were really coming in with a brand new car, I guess kind of how Peugeot was, but Lamborghini showed glimpses at times. As the season rolled on, the reliability got better both in the WEC and in IMSA, even though they didn't finish this last race. I believe I'm pretty sure I saw that they retired. And I do think that Cadillac is another one that has shown glimpses this year, but I think it's been obvious that the WEC program with Cadillac has, I think, lagged behind where those cars have been stateside. And I think 100%. a lot of it has to do with just not having as much data available to them as they do, in the stateside in IMSA. But, big positives for them to take away. They've had some solid results here throughout the season. They picked up a pole at Fuji. So they've had some good results. And with the big switch that Cadillac is going to be going through next year, of course, partnering up with Jota, then I'm expecting some stronger results from Cadillac next year. But still some positive pieces to take away.
Yeah, and Andrew's here noting something with the Cadillac program, which is something I've brought up before. Running one car is just a waste of money, always on the back foot.
Yeah.
I've said for, I guess, the last year now, I was talking about this before it was even noted that Ganassi was going to be departing that Cadillac program, that running one car in the WEC was hurting them. I mean, they're bringing in half the data over a race weekend. They're not maximizing their opportunity to dial in a setup in practice. And then, of course, you also have that concern with reliability. I mean, they're a manufacturer that probably had the pace to maybe win at Spa this year. Didn't, of course, because of the crash that happened. If you had a second car there, maybe it would have been a different story. There have been numerous occasions with Cadillac where I think they had performance to make something happen, whether it was just a confident podium or even a race win that just slipped away from them. Fuji was another result that slipped away from them as well this year. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what Jota can do with that program next year.
Yeah.
They're a race winning organization in the hypercar class already for them to be taking over that program with 2 cars next year. I would mention I'd be surprised if BMW doesn't get a win next year. I'd really be surprised if Cadillac Jota doesn't get a win next year.
Yeah. Yep.
So I do want to go over to the championship points from this race. Some of these are surprises, some of them are not. But nonetheless, we'll discuss all of them. The main one that's worth talking about is the Hypercar Manufacturers Championship, which was, in the Hypercar class, the closest championship battle we really had. And worth noting that earlier on in the race, when the Toyota, both Toyotas were really having a rather poor race after qualifying on the front 2 positions, it really seemed like Porsche could probably walk away with it. They had the 5 car comfortably in the top 5 for the majority of the race, and really weren't having many struggles with that car compared to the sister car, which was, like I said, outside of the top 10. Nonetheless, though, the 2 safety cars we had later on in the race did bring an opportunity for the number 8 Toyota. And of course, with the Manufacturers Championship in the WEC this season, only the top scoring car for that manufacturer is the one that actually got points. And also, a little caveat to that, it's only the top scoring factory car. So at Fuji, not Fuji, at Coda, when the 83 of course a Ferrari won, it was not Ferrari taking home top manufacturer points that race. It was Toyota, despite the fact that they finished second. So going into this race, there was a 10-point swing between Porsche and Toyota, with Porsche holding that lead. Toyota having a disastrous race last time out at Fuji, being their home race. And of course, Porsche picking up the race win there with car number 6. With this race, the points were increased, with it being an 8-hour race versus a traditional 6-hour race. The points for first place was bumped up to 38 points versus 25, which is what we traditionally see in the 6-hour races. Le Mans 50 for what it's worth. And second place was 27 points. So there's an 11-point swing between the top 2 positions there in this race. What it came down to at the end really was a battle between Toyota and Porsche. And Toyota picking off that race win, they were able to get that full swing, plus the extra bonus point that they got for putting the car on pole. It gave them a 2-point win in the Manufacturers Championship over Porsche, which, like I said, I think was a little unexpected going in. It certainly wasn't something that was by any means impossible. It was only a 10-point swing, but I think a lot of people saw the consistency that Porsche had been putting down this season between those 2 factory cars and thought maybe we'd see the same result here. Ultimately, finishing P2 just wasn't enough for them today.
Yeah, and that's a big championship for Toyota to pick up. Us as fans, maybe we don't focus on the manufacturers championship as much as, say, the drivers or the teams championship. But this is huge for them to go out and win that manufacturer championship. That's big. I mean, I'm sure Andrew, having just come off yet another TCR manufacturers championship with Hyundai, can attest that you want to go out and win the driver the team's championship, but that manufacturers championship is very important. So good to see Toyota pick up the win there, and you saw how excited everybody was when they crossed the line. It was they were jacked up about winning that race, taking that championship, and you were alluding to the sort of the NASCAR playoff format earlier. Toyota went out there and they won the final race, the winner take all race. So.
I suppose if that's the way we're going, we'd be talking about them as the drivers' champions as well, probably.
Oh, that's true.
I don't know. I don't really have any interest in going down the list and doing a full mock NASCAR playoff style points thing of the WEC results from this year to figure that out.
We're only 36 minutes in or something like that, so we'd be going off the rails earlier than usual.
For sure. In the drivers' championship, it was a lot less close. As I mentioned, it was the number 6 Porsche of Kevin Estre, Andre Lauder, and Lawrence Vantor. Starting off the season very strong with that race win at Qatar. They finished P2 in the next two races. Actually, they only finished outside the top 5 twice this year, one of them being at Coda and one of them being at Bahrain. Want to make sure I'm not lying with that. I can't remember where they finished at Le Mans this year. Did they finish? Here we go. We're furiously Googling where they finished it. Okay, they did finish 4th at Le Mans. Okay. Stand, not even corrected, just stand confirmed. Over the 50 Ferrari in second place, who really didn't have a great race either, finishing outside of the top 10, not getting any points from Bahrain. It really would have had to have been a great race from the 50 Ferrari and a disastrous race from the 6 Porsche for that championship to go the way of Ferrari. And ultimately, they were not able to capitalize on that. Over in LMGT3, talk about things that are not really a surprise. It was going to be one of the 2 Manthey Racing Porsches, and it was the number 92 Manthey Pure Racing Porsche over the sister 91 Manthey EMA. It's 139 points to 105 to the Porsche in second place there. Stu, do you want to take a guess which manufacturer won the Privateer World Cup in the Hypercar class?
Oh man, this is a tough one. But give me a team that is leaving Porsche and going to Cadillac next year. I don't know which car it was.
No, yeah, you got the gist of it. I was just going down the list of the championships Porsche won this past weekend, but yes,
I'm pretty sure they got that one.
They did get that one as well with the number 12 Hertz team Jota team picking up that victory. There was actually a post, by the way, on Twitter from Only Endurance, great page worth following if you don't yet, over on Instagram, or I think they're on multiple social media platforms at this point. The season results from Porsche this year, and I just want to read this down because this is, as seasons go, and we were talking in a previous episode about how 2023 was a little bit disappointing from them with that new 963 program, which was decent last year, but certainly nowhere near the level that it is this year, and then also with the GT programs struggling a little bit last year as well. This year, first place in the WEC Hypercar Drivers' Championship with a number 6 car. Second place in the Manufacturers' Cup, just barely losing out to Toyota. First place in the Hypercar World Cup with the 12 Jota. First place in the LMGT3 Drivers' Championship. First place in the LMGT3 Teams Championship with the Manthey Pure Racing number 92. First place in the IMSA GTP Driver and Teams Championships. First place in the IMSA GTP Constructors Championship. First place in the IMSA Michelin Endurance Cup GT3 Drivers, Teams, and Constructors Championships. First place in the IMSA GTD Pro Drivers, Constructors, and Teams Championships. Not a lot of losing from them this year, huh?
No. And I mean, the key one that's off that trophy case is that Manufacturers Championship that Toyota snagged from them.
And
and
the 24 Hours of Le Mans.
And the 24
which actually,
hours
this is not
of
even
Le
on
Mans.
this list, but they did win the 24 Hours of Daytona as well. So
that is true. You cannot. Yeah, there's absolutely no argument that Porsche kind of dominated on both sides of the Atlantic. Well, I guess the WEC is global, but you get what I'm trying to say.
all corners of the world.
All corners of the world they dominated in this year in seemingly all classes. So,
Except GTD.
Except GTD, which they
Maybe if you give Windward a Porsche, they'll change that. But
That's true. There's a FAF comment to be made probably somewhere in there, but but yeah, I mean, Porsche so strong this year. They really don't look like there's any signs of them slowing down. We're already hearing about what the team makeup is going to look like for their WEC entries in the LMGT3 class next year, and they're going to be strong again. So, you got to be looking in the way too early looking ahead at 2025, you got to be looking at them as favorites right now, and they're going to be going hard for that win at Le Mans. There's no doubt. There's a big hole in that trophy case that they want to fill with a nice trophy from Le Mans.
Yeah, and as we noted after Petit Le Mans, we're fully expecting them to have 3 cars there again next year with that auto invite for winning the IMSA championship. So
yes,
3 bullets in the chamber, I guess, for them to. Well, actually more if you include the Proton cars next year. So
it's true.
Whether that's one or 2.
Good point.
Okay, I think that's a wrap on the.
Before we move on, I don't think you touched on the LMGT3
I did
results.
not touch on.
So I have them right here, and there were some great battles throughout the race in LMGT3. Some good battles, and a good battle for the lead late in the going between the 55 Vista AF Corsa entry, who ended up going on to win over the number 81 TF Sport Corvette, and rounding out the podium, number 82 TF Sport Corvette. I know that Kenny pointed out here in the live chat, strong performance from TF Sport, and I would agree. They have had some strong results this season, but just haven't quite been on the same level as especially the Porsches. So a really strong end to the season for them, and I also could not go without mentioning the number 60 Lamborghini. Having a strong run as well. The Lamborghinis, actually, both of them at various points in this race, looked fairly strong. The Iron Dames looking a bit stronger in the earlier going. They had a much better qualifying effort than the number 60 entry. But the Iron Dames, they ran into an incident, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, they did enjoy some time leading the race
yes.
in the later stages after that last safety car restart as well. Looked like they might be able to back up the championship finale race winning move that they had from 2023.
Yes.
But ultimately, I think it was just a lack of pace from them in that final stint, just sort of gotten passed by some of the other LMGT3 teams.
I was thinking of I think I was thinking of a Codus and the 2 Lexus or Lexi.
Oh yeah,
Lexuses that had that were strong as well, but had issues. So
yeah, I was going to note them actually. They were very strong.
They were
in practice and in the early on in the weekend, definitely looking promising after a disappointing start to the season from them results wise. They're another team. If we were talking about the hypercar programs that have improved over 2024, Lexus definitely is a team that improved with that program over the course of 2024, at least from a pace perspective, although both of those cars unfortunately retiring from the finale at Bahrain.
That's a thing that I mean that I don't necessarily fully understand, is that those, I mean, every car has reliability issues, but I feel like they have way more reliability issues in the WEC races than they do in IMSA. But yeah, I mean, maybe this is a team. Vassar Sullivan's been running those cars in IMSA forever. I think they have a pretty good idea of what the limits are on that car. But it's just odd that it hasn't. It's odd to me that it hasn't translated as well to the WEC in terms of reliability. I thought that car, would have been bulletproof at this point. So, and they're not visiting tracks like Sebring or anything like that either. So. That's an odd one.
Yeah, well, I'm curious to keep an eye on that for 2024 with the possible introduction of one manufacturer, maybe Mercedes, into that class next year.
True.
We'll have to see how they hold up. Thank you for catching me on that one. I almost forgot about the LMGT3 results, and I appreciate you calling me out for that.
Can't forget about the GT3s.
Of course not. You know what? As a season review, and I guess we'll do a more formal season in review episode probably towards the end of December. Yep. But I think as an introductory year for that class, there were a lot of critics. People are saying, GTE is what made the WEC unique. It was sort of the last final frontier of the GTE class that had a lot of history dating back to GT2, going back to the early 2000s. And now it's just another GT3 championship. I think we saw A lot of moments out of that class this year that really solidified its place in the championship.
Yeah.
And I will be critical until the day I die about success ballast, and I wish they would get rid of it. But nonetheless,
Oh no.
especially at Bahrain with the battle that we saw after that final safety car, I think it's a class that's here to stay for a while, and I'm really excited with what we saw on track this year.
Yeah.
And also, Mr. Waffles in the chat saying that new Lexus GR GT3 can't come soon enough. Been seeing videos of it on track. Yeah, I think that's on track, scheduled to be on track for a 2026 debut, probably in both championships. So it'd be very interesting to see what they're able to get out of that car, because the base of the car that we have right now, before they put some upgrades on, has been with us since like 2017. So
Yeah.
it's been around for quite some time at this point,
The
especially compared to
oldest- Yeah.
manufacturers like Porsche, which are seemingly bringing a whole new car every 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Or yeah. I mean, we've talked about this before, where it's like the BMW, the M4. I mean, it feels like not that long, like a year or two ago that was unveiled, but no, they already have an Evo coming for it, set for next season. So it's wild, the development cycle of these cars, and just how that's changed in recent years with the more global adoption of GT3.
Yep. Now I will move it on, though. I'm going to leave it at that for Bahrain. I want to talk about the future of the hypercar class, the potential future of the hypercar class, because Daily Sports Car yesterday dropped an article, which I will link in the description, and I highly recommend you read that, because I'm just going to paraphrase this article. I want you to go out and actually read the reporting from its source. But noting that McLaren, which is a manufacturer that we've talked about for literally years now, will they join the hypercar / GTP ranks? Zach Brown has said many times, "Oh, we're looking into it," and they've been looking into it for a long while. I'll tell you that much. But it seems like finally we might be getting some positive news out of that camp. Now, I do want to say Graham Goodwin put this article out, and this is not 100% confirmed. This is happening, but when DSC puts out a story like this, I'd say there's a good amount of weight on it, because they usually don't put out stories that are pure speculation. So I like I said, I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit. Go read the actual article when you get the chance if you haven't yet. But it says that progress is now underway on developing a fully funded factory program, most likely with a 2027 starting point. The basis for this would be an LMDH chassis with no confirmed chassis partner, although Dallara, I guess, has been noted to have been whispered around a little bit. Of course, McLaren jumping back into the WEC, well, I guess for the first time, but jumping back to the 24 Hours of Le Mans this year for the first time since that McLaren F1 GTR program back in the late 90s. This would just be a continuation of that program. And worth noting, its suspected on-track debut, if this does happen, being in 2027. We're talking recently, or I guess in the past, about the regulation rule set that we have right now being extended as it stands to the end of the 2029 season. So if we're starting in 2027, we're expecting Hyundai / Genesis to start in 2026. You have to wonder if behind the scenes there's more confidence in this regulation rule set that it'll be extended even further.
Yeah.
Because I personally wouldn't imagine McLaren would be starting up a program that they know could end after 3 seasons. You think that first season is really get this thing off the ground. Let's sort out the teething issues with this car. And then 2028, we'll try to go for race wins. Maybe 2029, we go for a championship run or a Le Mans win. That seems like the speed at which other manufacturers have been going right now. So that's the first question that came to my mind. Also started thinking about with the Genesis announcement, but especially this one, suspectedly starting a year after that. That's where my mind goes first of all. And then also worth noting that this program is rumored in this case to be only entering the World Endurance Championship, although I suppose if interest came from an IMSA team, that maybe some discussions would flare up there potentially. And then the last piece from this article, the last sentence, says at least one additional major manufacturer is a real prospect to join the list of factory hypercar programs in the coming months. I'm going to throw a coin in the pot there and say we're probably talking about Mercedes here. So, Stu, I want to get your thoughts. Of course, this would be a big announcement. It's something that we've been talking about on a will they, won't they perspective for a couple of years now. But another manufacturer potentially jumping into the fray of the hypercar class. And what do you think of this?
I mean, it's obviously exciting news, but I mean, you know, it can only go so many times through the news cycle and still be truly exciting for me. I mean, we've heard now McLaren. This has gone through sort of the news cycle. This is probably the third time this year, maybe. So it's come a few times, it's gone a few times, and we're just kind of waiting for updates. Obviously, when it gets confirmed, if it gets confirmed, that will be fantastic news. You know, the news that, you know, it's unlikely that there would be an IMSA component to this is quite disappointing, I would say. But you know, that's my IMSA bias showing through as well. So I don't know. This is overall good news, but I mean, at the end of the day, believe it when I see it. I mean, they still have a ways to go before they can top Aston Martin's record that they've held of longests before they officially confirm an entry. But
hey, well, Aston confirmed early, to be fair to them, and then they pulled the program and then came back rather quickly. They confirmed that program actually fairly quickly after it was rumored for the second time. So
I guess it depends on which way you look at it. But in the competition of stringing us along the longest, yeah, I'm still going to give it to Aston. But yeah, this is obviously great news. Lots of things can change. Hopefully we can see. I don't know if it would be more funding that would. I mean, funding fixes a lot of problems. But if there were a team that would be interested in, you know, bringing this stateside in more of a customer capacity. But we also we were speaking earlier about how difficult it is to bring one car into a championship and expect to be competitive with it. So that might be a tall order for a customer team to do stateside. But we know that this, if it comes to fruition, would mean 2 cars in the WEC. So that's a pretty big commitment, and I think one that a lot of people would be very, very excited about.
Yeah, and also in the chat being mentioned, the article mentioned that the possible announcement would be made at next year's 24 Hours of Le Mans, which honestly is what I would expect anyways. That's usually the place where a lot of manufacturers want to drop that news. You're already in the spotlight, and why not? Especially with next year being the 30th anniversary, wow, it's crazy to say, of McLaren's Le Mans win in 1995. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there for now. Of course, I'll say the same spiel, but it's very exciting news. I'm waiting for official confirmation from McLaren, and I would love to see a car on track at some point in the next couple of years. But until we get that confirmation, this is definitely a step in the right direction. I'll say that much. Now that it seems like they're at least in advanced discussions about actually greenlighting this program.
Yeah.
And hopefully within the next year at this point, we'll have that official confirmation, and look forward to seeing them on the grid in a few years' time. Sort of in the same vein, but I guess a little bit off topic. Andrew's saying in the chat, I find it strange that all outlets only cite Chip Ganassi Racing as the main Genesis option. I don't know, Andrew. You trying to tell us something with that?
Yeah.
You work for Brian Herta, so if you're trying to give us an exclusive, we'll get you on the show and we can talk about it. But I will say,
BHA confirms Genesis. You heard it here.
I'll put it on the, it's going on Twitter right now. I was talking to some folks over at Sports Car 365 back at Petite, and then also just after Petite. And it seems to me that at least they're considering the option of additional manufacturers. I know Brian Hurd Autosport was brought up by them, along with another team. We'll just leave it at that. So it seems like there's at least a few teams in the hunt for that Genesis program, but that's one that I would expect to hear probably in the earlier half of next year, confirmation on who's going to be getting that program, at least in one of the two championships, because that is expected to be a 2-championship program between IMSA and the WEC.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's too easy to link them together right now, just because Chip Ganassi Racing is the odd one out right now. So that actually made me think about this time last year. I know I was I was driving the train of Meyershank is going to bring Alpine to IMSA, and I don't know about that. That one.
Well, that was
so well. So
that was a legitimate rumor for a very long time, and I know that was going around. It made too much
sense.
Yeah, it was making the rounds. In fact, I heard from a couple of people that was almost a done deal. So I don't know exactly where that fell through. There were a couple different things I heard, but of course that won't be occurring next year. Although I guess they'll be in a similar chassis car nonetheless.
It's true.
Someone's saying this is related to the McLaren Hypercar. Hope it gets more support than their GT3 program, which is something I actually wanted to note here. Feel so bad for Faf switch with how good the 911 was this year. That's one of the things that people brought up, I think, surrounding this announcement. Was, okay, you have a worldwide GT3 program in United Autosport in the World Endurance Championship. You have FAF, which was a championship winning IMSA team, and they definitely struggled this year. Mm-hmm. Why are we investing now in a hypercar program when we have these already should be successful GT3 programs that seem like they're struggling a little bit with manufacturer support?
Yeah. And this isn't a massive company either, right? Like, I don't know how size-wise McLaren would compare to Lamborghini, but you hear a lot. We've heard a ton in recent weeks with all this discussion about what's Lamborghini doing next year with their WEC program. It's been echoed by the manufacturer a ton that, we're a smaller manufacturer, we're not huge, and I really wonder just what McLaren has to put behind everything, because they also have a Formula One team, obviously, that's associated with it. They're involved in IndyCar as well. Like, there's I wonder at what point things get stretched too thin, and it does. If they do focus on the McLaren, this LMDH slash LMH. Well, I guess you mentioned it would be an LMDH. Formula E also, Nana Studio points out. Like, at what point is it too much? So hopefully this wouldn't be at the expense, long term of their GT3 program, because that is a car that has seen a reasonable amount of success around the world, and seems like a solid platform to race on if there is a bit of support that's behind it. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. This, of course, has to become official first, but definitely valid points. Valid points with what we've seen from them this year.
It brings forward a very valid question, which is who, at the end of the day, is bankrolling this program?
Yeah,
because Lamborghini, their program, I've seen a few sources say Iron Lynx is really like the main backer of that. It's less Lamborghini manufacturer and more Iron Lynx, who's the backbone of that program. Of course, the heart of racing is the main reason that we're getting the Valkyrie hypercar on track next year. Their investment in that program is really what reignited that. And am fairly confident in saying we wouldn't be seeing that program next year if the Heart of Racing was not on board, especially with, don't know if you saw the recent reports that were coming out from Aston Martin's financials, but they're not looking very promising, to say the very least. So you'd have to wonder if a program like this is being pushed by a team like United Autosport, who, of course, has a very rich and successful history in sports car racing. Perhaps they're the main backing with this. Of course, they already have that huge tie-in with Zach Brown. And maybe this is something that McLaren as a manufacturer would be not entirely hands-off of, but leaving a lot of the heavy lifting to United Autosport, and then they can continue to focus on their Formula E programs, their, of course, Formula One programs, IndyCar.
Yeah.
That's almost how I would imagine this going down, rather than being like a true McLaren fully fledged factory program, sort of similar to what we see from like Ferrari, or Toyota. Those seem like they're the corporate side of it is, of course, a lot more invested there than what we'll see with Lamborghini. And Andrew actually confirming for me, basically.
Yeah.
Iron Lynx and Prema are primarily funding the Lamborghini program.
Yeah. I wonder, with this McLaren program, McLaren, I was looking it up, is a much smaller manufacturer than Lamborghini, like a quarter to a fifth of the production output that we see there. But I wonder with McLaren, I think we saw it in IndyCar this past year, where they were talking about they have so many corporate partners that want to reach out and be associated with McLaren in one form or another. I wonder if this is going to be sort of another branch of that, where they're committing to this because they know that there's some serious corporate backing that is really enabling them to do a project like this, and it's going to be mainly, there's going to be some very significant backing, as opposed to, what I know Iron Lynx and Prema, as Andrew pointed out with Lamborghini, but Aston Martin, coming from that project being worked, I think, a lot from within, but I don't know. I wonder how much that plays into it as well. I imagine it'd be pretty significant.
And the last thing I'll bring up here, since it's very interesting, and sort of ties into this, Andrew.
Yeah.
Of course.
Andrew coming through tonight.
Employee of Brian Herta Autosport telling us. I remember when I was at Herta in 22, we were holding talks with Lamborghini to run the car in IMSA, but Lamborghini barely wanted to put money into the running of the cars. And to be honest with you, you can tell when you see Lamborghini right now. And one of the things, we're not really going to do a full-fledged story on this episode, but certainly has been in the news the past week, was the future of that Lamborghini Hypercar program. You can tell when a manufacturer, how invested the manufacturer is in the program, because Lamborghini is basically saying, yeah, we're not sure what the future of the program is going to be next year yet. We're going to announce soon. It's not entirely out of the picture, although fairly unlikely, that we're going to just pull the program right now after one season. Versus somebody like Toyota or Ferrari, who will put a multi-year commitment down from the start. So it is surprising that Brian Herta Autosport reached out to Lamborghini. So thanks for that exclusive.
Yeah.
But it's not entirely surprising, given what we've seen from Lamborghini, that they were cautious about doing that. And as you noted, it really seems like it's a Prema Iron Lynx program here, and they're calling the majority of the shots on where that car goes.
Yeah. I don't know. We're gonna, we don't want to dive too deep, I guess, into the Lamborghini tonight, but I'm sure, we're either going to find out this Thursday, or we're going to find out right before our next show.
I was gonna
That's
say, yeah, this is gonna get announced tomorrow morning.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's why I'm not going to
Emergency
talk
episode.
about it. Yeah, that's why I don't want to talk about it too much, because I'm just going to get proven wrong in the next episode. Much like, it's a great segue to move on here. I want to talk about some of the IMSA driver announcements that came like 12 hours after we had our last episode, and you and I were speculating who's going to be driving the Whelen Cadillac, who's going to be driving for Wayne Taylor Racing. And then, like, we got them all wrong, of course, and I wake up in the morning and all the driver announcements are there perfectly on a Wednesday morning. So you want to go over some of those for me so I can look like a fool?
Yes, we can look over some of them so you look like a fool. Of course, the one of the ones that you had just alluded to, the Whelen Engineering Cadillac, or Whelen Tomato. They have confirmed that Earl Bamber will be joining the lineup there. And along with, what's his first name? Frederick Vesti will complete the lineup along with Jack Aiken for the Michelin Endurance Cup races. So Earl Bamber, Jack Aiken, the full season entries. A pretty strong driver lineup there for the 31 Cadillac. What were your initial thoughts with this lineup?
My initial reaction is, well, I got that one wrong, because I specifically remember in the last episode saying I think Felipe Drugovich is a shoe-in for that one, because he was their endurance driver for this year at Le Mans, and just thought maybe he'd continue in that role. Surely enough, though, we get Vesti next year in the car, who I believe is continuing as a Mercedes F1 reserve driver. So also a bit of a tie-in with Formula One there, much like Drugovich from this year. Very strong driver lineup, though. If there's anything that the 31 car needs next year, though, it is a turn of luck on their side, because this year, going winless in 2020-24 is something they're going to want to forget very, very quickly. And I think that driver lineup, they're all proven drivers at this point. Vesti, it will be his first time, to my knowledge, in a prototype. But certainly we've seen what he's capable of doing in open wheel cars. And hopefully that knowledge translates over pretty quickly to the endurance driver role for that 31 team. And I expect them to be pretty strong out of the gate, much like they were at Daytona this year.
Yeah, the Cadillacs usually have shown to be pretty strong at Daytona, so yeah, I would definitely expect them to come out of the gate hot again. Also interesting to note with this lineup is Earl Bamber is also expected to be part of Hertz Team Joda's Cadillac lineup in the WEC. Of course, there is a conflict with WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca and the 6 hours of Spa, because that's what convergence equals conflicts. The Sports Car 365 article that was covering this news notes that it seems likely that Bamber would miss the 6 hours of Spa, but wait for all that to be confirmed. That was not the only Cadillac lineup that was announced, though. The Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti lineups have been announced. Again, don't recall if this was formally announced when we had our show last, but Ricky Taylor and Felipe Albuquerque in the number 10 Cadillac V Series R to go along with Will Stevens for the Michelin Endurance Cup events and Brendan Hartley for the Rolex 24. Of course, Will Stevens, Brendan Hartley, no stranger to Wayne Taylor Racing and competing in the endurance events or the Rolex with them. And then in the number 40 car, it's going to be Jordan Taylor and Luis Delatraz, along with Alex Lynn for the Michelin Endurance Cup races and Kamui Kobayashi. So a couple of strong lineups here once again for Wayne Taylor Racing. Again, you're keeping essentially the same full season driver pairings that we've had from carrying over from 2024. But yeah, some strong drivers there.
Yeah, especially very nice to see Kamui Kobayashi back in that car. Race winner at the Rolex 24 for Wayne Taylor Racing. Usually a driver they'd like to put in at the end of the race. Of course, don't even need to talk about how strong he is at Toyota Gazoo Racing in the World Endurance Championship. Really looking forward to seeing him back in the car at Daytona next year. It should be a lot of fun. But yeah, a very strong full season driver lineup there as well. Some of the drivers, of course, returning: Ricky Taylor, Felipe Albuquerque. I guess it would be a return to Cadillac for Felipe Albuquerque, correct? Because he used to race for Action Express.
Ooh, put me on the spot.
I believe he did. I'm trying to remember now. Am I wrong with that?
Did he? Well, did he race for a
He
season?
did. He did.
With
He
Wayne
raced for
Taylor
the number.
Racing?
Yes, he raced for the number. Okay, now I remember. He raced for the number 5, Action Express, back when they had the car, because Ricky Taylor and Felipe Albuquerque actually collided with each other at the 2017 24 Hours of Daytona. So, collision to teammate arc is what they were able to achieve there. But yeah, so a return to Cadillac for him, and then of course the Taylor brothers also a return to the GM mark for them as well, after Jordan only spent 1 year racing with Acura.
It's like a vacation.
Yeah, a little hiatus, and now back to GM, where he has a long history of results with them, dating back over 10 years.
And I'm sure very excited at the potential to go over to Le Mans, with now being back with GM in that GTP. Another GTP lineup that was confirmed were the Acuras. These are just the full season driver pairings that were confirmed, but Renger van de Zande moving over from Chip Ganassi Racing, moving over from Cadillac, and he will be teaming up with another driver that's switching manufacturers, Nick Yaloli, switching over from BMW and the M-Team RLL entries. They will be competing in the number 93 Acura. That is the Acura that is going to be engineered by Acura. Of course, the number 60 will be engineered by Meyershank Racing. Meyershank Racing, doing the support for both of those cars. And then no surprise really here in the number 60, Tom Blomqvist returning to IMSA full time, and he will be partnering up with old teammate Colin Braun. And as Mr. Waffles has pointed out, Meyershank Racing, these are a couple of strong lineups. Good to see Colin back. Definitely has earned that factory ride, and really looking forward to seeing these two terrorize the IMSA grid once again.
That's not a very good verb there.
They gave some teams nightmares, I'm sure. Some night terrors thinking about that number 60 and how quick that it was at various points. You can't forget that if Meyershank Racing, they had a 200-point penalty at the beginning of the season. If they didn't get that 200-point penalty in 2023, they would have not necessarily walked away with the GTP championship, but they would have won that championship by, I think, over 100 points. So, they are that's a strong team. That's a strong lineup, and they are going to be very competitive from the word go.
Yeah. That one actually slipped into our previous episode. I do remember that, but say it twice just as nice. I already gave most of my thoughts on that lineup, and of course it's just what you'd expect anyways. But a very strong pairing there. And
yes.
I've said many times before, I would expect Acura to return to being a championship caliber manufacturer next year at the hands of Meyershank Racing. Should be very exciting to see them go up against the Cadillacs of Wayne Taylor Racing, who is departing that Acura brand.
Definitely. There's a couple other driver lineups, that we can chat a little bit about. There hasn't really been much in the LMP2 front that's come out, that especially that we haven't discussed already. I'm sure we're going to start to see some of those programs get confirmed and come together, but we do have some. There was an entry that was confirmed in the GTD Pro class, a Rolex only entry, and that was with the Bartone Brothers Racing with a Get Speed. I don't know if I'm pronouncing Bartone or if it's Bartone. But you get what I'm saying here. They will be making their Rolex 24 debut here in January with a Mercedes, and there were no drivers that were confirmed with that announcement, but it is expected to be factory drivers. Of course, it's GTD Pro entry. We've consistently seen this with Mercedes over the past few years. Well, this past year and now this year, a Mercedes being added onto the grid with largely factory drivers. So good to see that there'll be yet another GTD Pro entry,
especially with that tie-in with Get Speed Racing, who internationally has a lot of experience with Mercedes as a brand, successful team, very proven there. And once that driver lineup is announced, excited to see what they can do at Daytona.
Indeed. And then one from the GTD front. We had Seth Lucas, who competed this year in the LMP2 class with MDK Motorsports, is going to be joining the newly rebranded Korthoff Competition Motors entry. If you are struggling to keep up with the name changes of this team, I do not blame you. I think this is the third time in 3 seasons that they have changed names. If not another additional time in there is possible. But Korthoff Competition Motors, of course, this is formerly Korthoff Preston Motorsport. And Seth Lucas will be a full season driver in that car, along with Kenton Cook, who was an Endurance Cup driver for them in previous seasons, now steps up to be a full season driver. Maxi Goetz is going to be joining them for the Endurance Cup races. So going to be good to see what those 3 can do. This is a car that has been, consistently for the past few years now in the hunt for race wins, just kind of looking to take another step forward and compete seriously for a championship. So we know the Mercedes platform is strong, and I think it's time will tell how this driver lineup fares as well.
Yeah,
I think that's it on the driver front. I don't know. I don't think I've missed any.
I think that's perfectly fine for now. We're going to hear a lot more, I'm sure, by even the next episode. We'll have more to report on.
Yeah, I would mention as well, I was looking into things a little bit here. When the Pratt Miller LMP2 was initially announced at Road Atlanta, an article back then mentions a mid-November date for confirming drivers and a little bit more information about that program. So hopefully by the time we have another episode, we'll be able to talk about what that Pratt Miller LMP2 is going to look like.
Yeah. All right. I think that leads us nicely into just wrapping up questions for this episode, and we can call it a night. Want to jump back a little while here. Earlier on, had a question. Any thoughts on the WEC Rookie Day testing? Saw Charles Leclerc's brother top the timing, while Rossi also impressed for BMW. Yes. You are technically... Well, so Leclerc finished 5th overall, but he was the fastest rookie that competed in that one-day test on Sunday with a 150.4 in the Ferrari 499P. Followed not too far behind by Valentino Rossi, only about a 10th behind in the BMW M Hybrid V8. Now, Rossi did note that on the broadcast for Bahrain that he will be continuing with GT3 for next year, and actually a reduced role compared to the program he was running this year between GT World Challenge and the WEC. Said his expectation right now is to just be running the WEC in LMGT3 next year. Although, what does it mean for down the road if he has pace in a hypercar? Maybe a wild card entry at Le Mans, a third driver somewhere, maybe a 4th driver at the Rolex 24 someday. Would certainly bring a lot of fans to the race, and I would love to see something like that. But for now, comfortably in a very strong LMGT3 car for next year. And Arthur Claire, what do you have to say about him? I guess the dream thing for him, I think he's mentioned before that he would love to do the race with Charles Leclerc. I don't need to tell you what numbers that would do for sports car racing if you had that entry at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. But that would certainly be one to get really excited about. But I think even Arthur as a driver with that family connection, successful driver in Formula 2, I believe, if not Formula 3. Even finding him slotting his way into a potential full season hypercar role with that 499P in the future would be very promising as well with the performance that he put down at that rookie test. A couple other drivers worth noting on here as well, a couple of other rookies. Victor Martins in the 36 Alpine, also around that same time with a 150.7, which is only less than 3 tenths off the fastest rookie time from Leclerc. Max Hess in the 15 BMW M Hybrid V8, and Thomas Neubauer closing out the top 5 for the rookies in the 51 Ferrari. Also only about half a second off of the fastest time set by Leclerc in that same car. So yeah, a lot of promising rookie performances there. I'll be interested to see if we get any news on any of those drivers. We still do have some open slots in the 2025 GTP/Hypercar driver market open. So interested to see if any drivers are able to slot into those positions. But yeah, some times worth noting there from Sunday.
I mean, we can't talk about the rookie test without talking about Mahavir Raghunathan, can we? The former one dubbed as one of the worst F2 drivers ever, and he put up a solid time. In Ferrari 296 LMGT3. So
yeah, actually the fastest rookie time in that class. So the 55 Vista A, of course, a Ferrari. Only about 9/10 of a second off the fastest time of the day set by Ben Barnicoat in the 78 Lexus.
Yeah, doing some running for the first time with torque sensors, Ben Barnicoat was. So
yeah, which will be introduced next year.
Yes. Introduced stateside next year.
Stateside next year, yes. Already in the WEC. Thank you. Okay. Next question was from Alex. Do you think Porsche winning the Drivers' Championship, Toyota winning the Manufacturers' Championship, or Ferrari winning Le Mans is the most impressive to you from this year? Good question. Seems like you have a definitive answer.
I want to go off. I think a customer team, the customer teams winning races was very impressive.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that those 2 cents, but all of these are very impressive. I think all of them should be applauded for that. But immediately coming to mind, I thought it was really impressive seeing the customer teams go out and win a couple races.
Yeah, I'll plus one that aside from you. Between these 3 specifically, I would say Porsche winning the Drivers' Championship just because of how comfortably they won that championship. Of course, they didn't lock it up a race early, but the turnaround from that program this year was really noteworthy. Compared to where the 963 program was last year, they were really on the back foot. They were not the best manufacturer out of the new Hypercar/LMDH teams last year. And this year really were able to turn that around very quickly. Like they won Qatar, first race of the World Endurance Championship. They won Daytona, first race of IMSA, and really didn't turn around in either championship. There were some other teams that started to give them a bit of a fight, but it was Porsche who really dominated the top of the championship standings for the majority of the season in both championships, IMSA and the WEC. So for me, that was what was most impressive from them. But all 3 of those are really quite impressive. Ferrari winning Le Mans second year in a row with a 100% winning streak for the 499P. They're going to want to continue that. Just, axe the program. Don't axe the program right now. Please don't. But if you did, then I would have a 100% winning streak with that car, which only a few cars can say from the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Also, follow-up question, what can Porsche do to win Le Mans in 2025? Seems like they're strong in qualifying, but when it comes to the race, not so much. To be honest with you, there's not much they can do.
Yeah.
They found their way to the top of the qualifying timesheets this year with that really great lap from Kevin Estre. What more do you need to do? I guess just maximize the performance over the course of a race. there's they didn't really lose by much this year, to be honest with you. And I know we had that very long safety car intervention this year, which kept everybody bunched up quite well. But they were just lacking a little bit of consistency over multiple stints that Ferrari and Toyota really had them beat on. But I would say they were solidly the third strongest manufacturer at Le Mans this year. So just perfecting that performance between the three drivers at Le Mans, and then also maybe having a little bit stronger race pace rather than just one lap. Absolutely no reason they're not going to be in contention next year. In fact, I think I went on record maybe last episode or 2 episodes ago saying they were my very, very early pick to win Le Mans next year. So we shall wait and see.
Yep.
With so many championships adopting Group GT3 cars, do you think there will be a GT3 fatigue in the future coming for fans? No, I really don't think so. There are, of course, fans who are disappointed about the onset of GT3 in the World Endurance Championship. People who are still upset that GTE was sort of shoved aside. At the end of the day, there wasn't really much of a choice. It was a class that was dwindling in its final years. And I think the quality of racing that GT3 puts on consistently in multiple championships around the world, especially if we get an additional manufacturer in that class next year, I can't see many people complaining about it or feeling fatigued by it. Maybe if one thing, people would love to see a pro GT3 class in the WEC rather than just having GT3 be an amateur-based class or a pro-am-based class. But apart from that, I can't, for myself at least, say that I would see that happening.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It's, yeah, that's about it for me. I don't really foresee that happening, especially with the quality of racing that we get from GT3.
Yeah. Not really a question here, but just a comment from Andrew. Keep an eye for a surprise driver in a Corvette if everything turns out right. Interesting. I assume you're going to be talking about the IMSA side of things, being that's where your connections would be. So I shall keep my ears open for an interesting driver announcement. I assume you're probably talking about something surrounding an extra driver for the Rolex 24, but I shall pay attention to that.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Is Dale Jr. going to make his return to a Corvette GT car? I mean, it's you know what? Actually, no. This year, I guess, was 20 years since he was last in one, because it was 2004, I believe, in the American Le Mans Series, where he didn't really have a great outing at Sonoma, to say the least. But
it might be a little bit more difficult for Dale. He wasn't a great road racer. But you know, he doesn't have his commentary gig right now. He's kind of got the summer off, so maybe he's just been frantically testing that AWA, that extra AWA Corvette. You know, he went and he's been testing that all summer. So
yeah. Well, you know, for context, I was joking about that, but
that would put the Rolex 24. That would bring in a whole bunch of more fans that would be interested in that race, that's for sure.
Yeah. The 24 Hours of Le Mans clashes with the Canadian Grand Prix next year, though. Yeah, this is referring to me saying, could we see Leclerc, Arthur Leclerc in a car with his brother, Charles Leclerc, at Le Mans? Yeah, it's not really something I expected for next year anyways. But down like 10
the road, years down the line?
Well, I wouldn't say 10 years, but maybe something in the next 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, Charles Leclerc said he wants to do Le Mans. Whether or not his current commitments at Scuderia Ferrari and F1 allow him to do that in the first place, not so sure.
Oh man, but, are we gonna get a Leclerc versus Verstappen at Le Mans?
I wouldn't rule it out someday.
Yeah,
because both of them have said they want to do it.
Lando has some experience in sports cars, I think.
Yeah, with United he ran with United at Daytona in 2018. LMP2.
Throw Stroll in there too.
Actually, it wasn't even LMP2 in 2018. It was that combined prototype class. So he was actually fighting for the overall. Well, fighting for the overall win in 2018 with that United Ligier at Daytona.
Oh, maybe Kevin Magnussen is going to be in the Corvette. Maybe that's what it is. Has GM ties? You know?
Yeah,
Maybe.
prior GM ties.
Yeah,
Food for thought.
Never know. Could help them with their F1 testing on the side, you know? All right. We're going off the hook.
How are we doing with that F1 program?
Yeah.
Why won't we see Acura in the WEC? Honda.
Yes.
That's why. Honda Global is not interested in it right now. So if Honda Global wakes up one day and the executives there decide, you know what, let's do it. Here's the issue with them, though, is you can't just run Le Mans, which I think is what they would want to do. I think Honda's probably interested in running Le Mans, but they don't want to run the full WEC program with that Acura-based car, with Acura really only being a North American brand. They would have to rebrand it probably as a Honda. Seems like for a while it's something they haven't. Well, yes, but it seems like, especially before we got that merger of HPD into HRC, where it's now HRC US.
Yeah.
It seemed like that was just completely separate from Honda Global, sort of similar to how Toyota Gazoo Racing and TRD stateside were largely separate entities for a long time. I wouldn't rule it out entirely for the future, but for now it's just one of those things that's just tossed off to the side. We're going to leave it there for now until if Honda decides to change their mind in the future. Yeah. But I think there was definitely ambition for them to go there, because as I remember, that's the reason Wayne Taylor Racing switched to Acura in the first place, was because they wanted to try to go to Le Mans with Acura.
Now, why did they switch away?
Yeah, well, sort of says what their intentions are, I guess.
Yep. Hybrids.
Go ahead.
With WRC dropping hybrid power units, could you see other motorsports doing the same? That's from the Fastest 33, and then Anana Studio piping in. The BTCC is also dropping it next year. I mean, time will tell. We always talk about hydrogen and what that could be for the future, especially in the WEC. So I think that could, if hydrogen ends up, turning out to be something that's viable, then we that would certainly mean the dropping of a hybrid power unit. But right now, with the regulations the way they are, especially with LMDH, I mean that there's a spec hybrid system in the LMDH cars, so the hybrid's not going away from the top class anytime soon.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. The thing right now with sports car racing is we're starting to hit a crossroads of, we have this very successful formula right now that's going to be around with us for another 5 years.
Yeah.
So what can we do after those 5 years are up to keep manufacturers signed on?
Yeah.
Toyota flat out said they're interested in hydrogen. Alpine has said they're interested in hydrogen. BMW and Hyundai have said they're interested in hydrogen. So that seems like the next logical step that we're going to be taking. That introduction of hydrogen has been pushed back many years now. I think we're back to 2028 now. Could get delayed even further. But at the same time, not all of the manufacturers we have signed on right now are interested in hydrogen. So it seems like their ambition is to have sort of a mixed class eventually, where both formulas are fighting for the same overall win. How successfully you can balance that, who knows?
Yeah.
I guess that's the $1 million question. But right now, it seems to me their interests are, we have all the manufacturers here. Let's do what we can to make sure that they're still satisfied and happy, so that they'll stay racing with us and they won't leave the championship entirely after this rule set is up. So right now, if all the manufacturers are signed on and they're interested in hybrids, we're going to be sticking with hybrids for however long they are still interested. And being the fact that the hybrids are so cheap in the series right now, and the manufacturers are interested in hybrids, I think we're going to be seeing them for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But not required still. worth
That's
noting.
true.
Because, of course, the hypercar regulations, you don't need a hybrid system. Aston Martin will not be running a hybrid system next year. So there is still some flexibility in there for manufacturers who want to take the step in and build an entirely or a car that's built entirely to their specification if they do not want to run a hybrid system. So we're starting to see that with Aston Martin next year. I'm curious if any manufacturers will follow suit, but for the time being, the remainder of the OEMs are all committed to hybrid right now. Okay, I think, I mean, that covers the bulk of the questions we had from this episode. We're a little over an hour and a half in, so I think that is a good place to call it a night. I do want to say thank you to anybody and everyone who tuned into tonight's episode. I know we're not the most pressing thing going on in the United States right now. So the fact that a very solid handful of people tuned in tonight and asked some questions and wanted to talk sports car racing, all I'm really looking for here. I'm very satisfied with that. Stu, any closing thoughts from you tonight?
No, I don't think I have anything. I don't think I have anything to add. I'm quiet tonight.
I'll give you a little break. How does it feel to be fully in the off season now? It's only going to be for about a month, no, 2.5 months or so.
Honestly, I was looking the other day trying to plan some stuff out for the rest of the off season, and I was like, "There's no off season. It's just, we're the beginning of November already. We are legitimately 2 months from now. Well, 2
months and change.
Yeah, 2 months, like 2.5 months from now, we're gonna be talking about cars on track at Daytona. So, oh man,
we're gonna be talking about cars on track at Daytona in about 2 weeks' time. Actually,
that's true. I think did the Aston Martin get confirmed for that? I thought I saw that it did, but I thought I saw that mentioned. I'm not
sure. It was rolling around Bahrain. I know that.
Yeah, maybe I heard it somewhere.
Well, nonetheless, I'm hoping to see them on track at Daytona in a couple of weeks' time. We do have that closed IMSA test, which, as name implies, will not be open to the public, unfortunately. But you'll see some content on social media for sure of cars on track, hopefully including that new Aston Martin Hypercar for 2025. A little bit of a sneak preview of what we'll be seeing in just a couple months' time on track. And yes, as Anana Studio noted in the chat, there's still the NLS Super GT and Asian Le Mans Series in 2024 for those who still want their sports car racing fix into the off season. But for the championships we focus on in this podcast, get a bit of a break for.
Oh, don't forget about the NASCAR championship.
I'm not talking about the NASCAR championship. I'll leave it at an hour and 38 minutes. I think that's a good way to end this episode. So. Again, thank you so much to anybody who tuned in tonight or on a podcasting platform. Hope to catch you in a couple weeks' time. We'll be back for another episode of the Rain Race podcast. For now, take care.